Hey everyone, I'm glad you could join us today. This week I've been talking about the importance of obeying God in our lives. Yesterday I talked about the connection between our love for God and our obedience to God. That if we say we really love God, then it's going to manifest itself in our obedience to God. Today I want to talk to you about the connection between our obedience and worship. Now, for many of us, we have a very narrow definition of worship. Worship for many of us is confined to maybe just 1 hour on Sunday morning when we gather together in the church building and worship. For others, it may be confined to those times in which we sing songs and praises to God. But there's a much broader definition of worship. Worship simply means it is giving someone honor in recognition of their merit. And so when we worship God, what we're saying is we honor you and recognize that you are the ruler of our lives. And I want you to see today that obedience is really our highest form of worship to God. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, the account tells us there that Saul went to battle the Amalekites as God had commanded. God had commanded him to destroy all the livestock. However, Saul didn't do that. When the prophet Samuel arrives, Samuel confronts Saul on his disobedience to God. And Saul responds by saying, I did everything that God told me to do. Just then, Samuel hears the animals making noises just over the ridge. And he says to Saul, well, if you destroyed all the animals, what's this that I hear? And Saul then kind of backtracks and he says, well, I kept those animals alive so that we could offer them as a sacrifice to God. Then in 1 Samuel 15:22, Samuel responds to Saul by saying this: Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. Samuel said to Saul, he says, God finds more pleasure in you obeying him than any sacrifice that you could offer. And actually, Samuel said, obedience is better than sacrifice. It is our highest form of worship. Because if we're really going to give God the recognition that he deserves as king of our life, it's going to be manifested in obedience. Because what happens is when I am living in disobedience, what I'm in all actuality saying to God is that, God, I'm in charge. I know how to live my life. I know how to make the best decisions. However, when I begin to live in obedience, then what I'm saying to God is that now I'm showing you the honor and giving you recognition as the king of my life. And I am humbling myself and I am submitting myself to your will in my life. And so that is why obedience really is our highest form of worship. Let me ask you this. Do you allow people to have full access to your house? If you're like me, I'm sure there's probably a room or maybe 2 or maybe 3 or maybe a whole downstairs that you don't want people to see because that's where you hide all your junk and all your stuff that you don't want people to see how cluttered you really are. And many times we do that with God. We have this one part of our life where we say, God, you can have this part of my life, but this part over here, I'm going to shut off to you, and this part, I'm going to live the way I want to live. It may be in regard to finances. It may be in regards to relationships. It may be in regard to your tongue. It may be in regard to what you look at on the internet. But you may have a small area of your life where you're saying, God, you can have all this other spot except for this one room. And what we're saying is that we're saying that God cannot be king of our entire life. And God desires more than anything to be king of your life. And we demonstrate that he is king of our life and we worship him when we obey him. I want to encourage you today to desire to live in obedience and allow God to have free reign of every room of your life.